Hello and welcome to the final project for section 2. In this project, we'll build a program which will be a user class that reads in information about a user and permissions from a permissions.json file, and then it outputs the combined user info with the permissions set for the user to another file. And then every time we run the program with new user info, it continues to do this and add users to that file. Okay, so basically, to summarize, reads in user info that is provided, reads in permissions from a separate JSON file, creates a new user with the assigned permissions, and then saves the user in a new users listing file. Now, if the file doesn't exist yet, it creates one. All right, so let's take a look at how it's going to look. Here is the user permissions template.json file. So you see a hash-like structure over here. You have the accounts, you'll have read access, policies, you have write access, users, you have write access. Okay? And basically, I have a runner.rb file. When I run this file, it will create the user that I provide over here, get the permissions from here, and then output this to a new file. So let's see what that looks like. Over here, I'm providing the email as mashurhussain@gmail.com and the name is Mashur. So if I run this, so all I'll do is say ruby runner.rb. There you go, you get an output of the email name and then the permissions. And this should also create a new users file. So let's take a look at this over here. Users.json file. Check it out. We have email, we have name, and then we have the permissions for this user. So if I change this, let's say I want to make this John Doe at example.com, and over here just say username John, then save that. Now if I run this again, ruby runner.rb, now we have a new user, the name, and the permissions. So if I open the users.json file, sorry, let me just open it again. Notice how John Doe got added now. Okay, so we're going to build this user class and build this whole project with the runner, with the template, and the user class, which will look like this. All right, so let's get started. So first thing I'm going to do here is I will exit out of my sample solution, and from your Ruby projects folder, create a new directory. So mkdir, and then section 2 underscore project. Then I'll cd into section 2 project. Okay, so now I should have a folder over here. If I refresh this, there's my section 2 project. So first thing, right off the bat, I know I'm going to need this user permissions template JSON file, which will have my permissions. So I'll copy this, close out of that file. Actually, I'll close out of all this so it doesn't get confusing. I'll just leave the steps open. Okay. So right click, new file, and we're going to call it user underscore permissions underscore template.json, and then open the file. There you go, save it. So we have the permissions over here. And next we're going to create the user class. So right click, new file, user.rb. Okay, and then we'll build a runner later on. So let's work on the user class. Now, since we're dealing with reading from and writing to a JSON file, we're going to need to require JSON. Okay, this will give us the ability to work with JSON files. So save that. So now, since this is a user class, I'll say class user. Remember, for class name, it has to, the first letter has to be capitalized, and then end. Okay, so now we have our class. So I already know I'm going to be working with name, email, and permissions in this class. So I'll set my attribute accessor. So attr underscore accessor. And then I'll work with email. So colon email, name, and then permissions. Okay. Now, as with any classes, I'll need to instantiate the class. So I'll need an initialize method. So first thing, define initialize. Now, what am I going to pass in my initialize method? I'm going to pass in and assign email, name, and permissions. So I'm going to use a shortcut here. I'm going to do star args. Okay. Now, what is this star? The star before args, that's called a splat operator. Okay. Now, what it does is it takes in the arguments that I pass in as they arrive, and it creates an array. So if the first argument passed in, let's say I passed in 3 or 4 arguments. If the first one is email, args 0 will be email. Then args 1 would be name. Okay. So basically the order in which we pass that in. All right. And then the permissions we're going to set from the JSON file. So we'll deal with that later. So let's go ahead and take care of this. So at email, we're going to assign as args 0. Okay. Then at name, we're going to say args 1. All right. And now we have to deal with permissions. So permissions, we're going to instantiate using user.permissions from template. Now, what is this permissions from template? This is a method I'm calling here on the user class, and I haven't defined it yet. So let's go ahead and define this method. Define. Now, remember, I'm calling this on the class. This is going to be a class method. So remember, with class methods, we have to do self dot permissions from template. Okay. Now here we're going to read this in from a file. Now the way to do that is file.read, and then I have to provide the name of the file. Now there are various ways you can provide this. Let's say if you were entering in from the command line, I could use args, but what I'll use here, I'm going to hard code the name since I know this file name, which is user underscore permissions underscore template.json. All right. But this is simply reading in the file. I have to store in what it's reading in, okay, to a variable. So I'll just name it file. All right. So file equals file.read user permissions template.json. Then I'm going to do JSON.load. Now what this will do is this will create a JSON object out of what I've read in. All right. So I'm going to have to provide it what I've read in, which is file. And then you can provide it like options, but we're going to just leave that nil. We're not going to provide any options. And then to make the output look the way we want, we're going to say symbolize names true. Okay. So you're basically going to get a nice format for the output. And that's it. So now I have the name and email that I'm going to read in. I have the permissions that I'm going to read in from the file. Now what I have to do is I have to save this to a new file, right? Save this to a new users.rb file. How do we do that? So what I'll need is a define save, a save method. So in the save method, what do I need? First, I'm going to need to construct a hash, which I'll save to users.json file as a JSON object, right? So far, I have read in the permissions and assigned them to @permissions instance variable. So let's go ahead and convert this to a JSON object. All right, how do we do that? First, I'm going to construct that hash. So in the hash, I'll say email is @email, which I have over here. Then name is going to be @name. And then permissions is going to be @permissions. However, this is not a JSON object, right? I have all of this. To convert this to JSON, I need this method dot to underscore JSON. All right. But then now I have the JSON object, which consists of email, name, and permissions. But I need to save this to a file, a new file. And if the file doesn't exist already, I need to create that file. So first I'll assign this to a variable. So I'll just call this self underscore JSON. You can call this whatever. This is just a variable name. And then I'm going to append this to the users.json file. All right. So first I'll open the file. So open within quotes the name of the file. So I'll call it users.json. And then comma, and then I'm going to say a for append. Okay. Then do, and within pipes file. So I'll open a block and I'll close the block with an end. Now, simple enough. All I'll do is file.puts, because I want to add this to the file. Now this is stored in this variable that's called self underscore JSON. So puts self underscore JSON. Simple enough. Save that. And believe it or not, that's all we need. So now all I need is a runner file. Okay. A runner file essentially is the file that I'm going to run to provide the email and the name and any other items that I want in it. Okay, so let's go ahead and create that. I'm going to right click here, new file, runner.rb, open it up. Now, first thing I'll do here is require pp. This is basically pretty print, and it's very simple. It really does nothing except it just styles the output a little better. And then I'm going to require relative user, okay, which is my user class. Now, why am I saying require relative user? What I'm essentially saying is I'm saying use the user class that I built and put in this folder. Instead of following the hierarchy of the Ruby runtime environment, I'm saying look here when I'm running from, and the user that's relative to this, so same path, same folder, use that user.rb file. All right. Now I'm going to need the user. So I'll say user.new, and then I'll put in whatever I want. Mashur, I was saying at example.com as the email. And then I'm going to say Mashur as the name. And that's it. So every time I run the runner, I can just change the email and the name and add users to my file. All right. So I want to output the object. So pretty print user. This will basically output the object. And then I want to save this. Well, this save is the save method that I created here. Okay. So this will go out to the users.json file and output the object, the JSON object that we have created with the email, name, and permissions. So let me go ahead and save this and let's run it and see what happens. So Ruby runner.rb. Okay, so there's the pretty print output. Okay, it gave me email, name, and the permissions. And now, since I did not have this file before, it went ahead and created users.json file over here. So if I open it, there you go. You have email in the format that I specified over here, email. Then it has name, and then the permissions, right? And the permissions, there's the permissions that are set in the format that I specified. Okay. Now, if I want to add another user, I can just say Joe, and then Joe, save that, run it again. All right, now if I open users.json, well, it was already open. So let me open it again. There it is, Joe got added. Okay, congratulations, you've just completed the project. Okay, great. Now that completes our section on Ruby. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you were able to absorb a lot of the principles behind object-oriented programming and Ruby in general. Now, I would highly recommend that you continue to practice Ruby and building simple Ruby programs in your spare time. Now, in the next section, we'll jump straight to Rails and start building web applications. See you there.